One day, my mother looked me straight in the face and called me a loser. That word still echoed in my ears as her message lit up my phone 4 days later, asking for money like nothing had happened. I was standing by my apartment window when it came in, city lights flickering like they couldn't decide whether to stay or disappear. I remembered the way she'd said it, flat, certain, almost bored. Loser. The way my brother smirked behind her. The way my name was quietly removed from the family vacation group chat, as if erasing me would make their lives cleaner. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't defended myself. I smiled, because silence felt heavier than anger. Now her text blinked on my screen. Can you pay your brother's school fees? My hands were steady. My chest was calm. That's when I understood something important. They never stopped needing me. They just stopped respecting me. I was the quiet one in our family, the one who did well enough to survive but never loudly enough to be celebrated. My brother was the investment. The pride. Every achievement of his was announced like a national holiday. Every mistake of mine was treated like proof of a theory already decided. I learned early that love in our house came with conditions. Be useful. Be invisible. Don't need too much. When my father passed, those rules hardened. I worked through college, sent money home without being asked, and listened while my mother told relatives I was still figuring life out, even as my paychecks kept the lights on. They saw me as reliable, not capable, convenient, not valuable. I was the background noise of the family, noticed only when I went quiet. Vacations were booked without my name. Decisions were made without my voice. When I visited, conversations paused until I left the room, then resumed like I'd never been there. I told myself it didn't hurt. I told myself independence was freedom. But every time my phone rang with a request instead of a question, something inside me hardened. Not anger. Clarity. I began to see the pattern. I was not family to them. I was a resource. And resources, I realized, are only appreciated when they stop flowing. It wasn't one moment that broke me. It was the accumulation, the quiet math of disrespect adding up over time. At dinner, my mother would ask my brother about his plans, his dreams, his future. When she turned to me, it was only to say, "You're still at that job." Her eyes never lingered long enough to hear the answer. My brother would scroll through his phone, nodding absently, already certain the conversation didn't include me. When the vacation photos appeared online, I noticed the careful framing. My mother smiling in front of the ocean. My brother tagged, praised, congratulated. My absence left unmentioned, like a missing brick no one wanted to explain. A cousin messaged me, "Why didn't you come?" I typed and erased 3 responses before settling on silence. Even their requests carried a tone, soft, rehearsed, transactional. Just this once. You're the responsible one. Family helps family. Each phrase landed like a small cut, precise and dismissible. Never an apology. Never gratitude that lasted beyond the transfer confirmation. I began to notice the pauses. How my mother inhaled before asking for money, as if bracing for resistance she'd never had to face. How her voice warmed only after I said yes. How quickly it cooled again once she got what she needed. I didn't confront them. I watched. I listened. I learned where they expected me to bend. And in those silences, between a glance and a request, between a message sent and a reply, I felt something shift. Not rage. Not bitterness. Patience. The kind that waits until the moment when being underestimated becomes their most expensive mistake. The turning point didn't come with fireworks. It arrived quietly, the way truth usually does. I was sitting alone at my desk late one night, my laptop open, bank statements glowing softly in the dark. Line after line told a story no one in my family would ever bother to read. Tuition payments. Rent support. Emergency transfers labeled urgent. I added the numbers, then added them again. The total made my throat tighten, not because of the money, but because of the certainty. I had already paid for my place in that family. Many times over. My mother's message about my brother's school fees sat unanswered. For the first time, I didn't feel guilt pressing me to respond. I felt something steadier. A question I'd never allowed myself to ask. What happens if I stop? So I tested it. Not dramatically. No speeches. I replied hours later with a simple line. I can't do it this time. The silence that followed was immediate and revealing. No concern. No curiosity. Just a delayed, clipped response, okay. That single word confirmed everything. My value had never been emotional. It had been financial. And the moment I stepped out of that role, I ceased to exist. That's when I knew, this wasn't rebellion. It was self-respect. And once I chose it, there was no going back. I didn't rush into anything. Revenge, I'd learned, fails when it's emotional. I treated this like a correction, not a confrontation. I work in finance, numbers, contracts, timelines. Patterns don't lie to me. I reviewed everything calmly, standing transfers, shared accounts, informal promises that were never written but always expected. I separated what was obligation from what was habit. Then I ended the habits. I closed the automatic payments first. Quiet clicks. No notifications sent. I changed passwords, updated beneficiaries, moved savings into an account only I could touch. Each step felt surgical, almost boring, which told me I was doing it right. Next, I documented. Dates. Amounts. Messages asking for help framed as family duty. Not to threaten anyone, but to remind myself later that this wasn't cruelty, it was accuracy. If they rewrote the story, I wanted the original draft. I didn't announce boundaries. I enforced them. When my mother hinted about expenses, I replied politely and vaguely. When my brother complained indirectly through relatives, I stayed unavailable. Calm is unsettling to people who expect compliance. Meanwhile, I invested in myself, courses I delayed, a better apartment closer to work, time I'd never been allowed to waste on rest. My life grew quieter, stronger. This wasn't about punishing them. It was about removing the illusion that they could take from me forever without consequence. The payoff didn't arrive with an argument. It arrived with a phone call I didn't answer. By the end of the month, the gaps I'd closed began to show. My brother's tuition deadline passed. My mother's voicemails stacked up, careful at first, then strained. I listened to one while making coffee, the kettle screaming softly in the background as she said my name the way she used to when I was a child and she needed something fixed. I never returned the calls. I didn't block anyone either. Silence works best when it's visible. Relatives started reaching out, their messages dressed up as concern. Is everything okay? Your mom sounds stressed. I replied with short, neutral sentences. I'm fine. I'm busy. Truth without explanation. Then came the shift. The tone changed. No more instructions. Just uncertainty. My brother texted me directly for the first time in years. No jokes. No assumptions. Just, can we talk? I read it twice, then set the phone down. Outside, rain streaked the windows, blurring the city into soft grey lines. For once, the pressure wasn't on me to fix anything. They were finally feeling what I'd carried alone. And I felt nothing but calm, because consequences, when delayed, are still consequences. The fallout wasn't loud. It was awkward, uneven, human. My mother stopped calling and started telling people a story instead. In her version, I was distant, changed, too focused on money. I heard this secondhand, through relatives who suddenly spoke to me more carefully, like I might break. A few judged me. A few quietly understood. Most just adjusted, the way people do when the power in a room shifts. My brother struggled. Not dramatically, but visibly. He learned what deadlines feel like when no one cushions the fall. When he did speak to me, there was no arrogance left, only discomfort. Our relationship thinned to something honest but fragile, stripped of entitlement. What surprised me most was myself. I didn't feel smaller for stepping back. I felt clearer. My self-worth stopped being negotiated through guilt and obligation. I wasn't the family's savior anymore, but I also wasn't their afterthought. This is why it matters. Because so many people watching this have been cast in the same role. Dependable, silent, taken for granted. We're taught that endurance equals love, that sacrifice is the price of belonging. But respect is the real currency. And when you stop paying for a seat at a table that never valued you, you don't lose family. You gain yourself. Months passed. The noise faded. My phone grew quieter, and with that quiet came space to think, to breathe, to exist without bracing myself for the next request. I stopped replaying old conversations in my head. I stopped wondering what I should have said. Peace, I learned, isn't loud. It doesn't demand witnesses. I don't know what my family tells themselves now. Maybe they believe I changed. Maybe they believe I failed them. I've made peace with both. The future I'm building doesn't require their approval, only my honesty. I still hope for something healthier one day, a relationship built on choice, not dependence. If that day comes, it will start with respect, or it won't start at all. Until then, my life continues forward, steady and intact. I no longer confuse love with endurance. I no longer mistake silence for weakness. And I no longer smile to make others comfortable at my own expense. The word loser doesn't echo anymore. Because the moment I stopped being useful to them was the moment I finally became free.